Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about reverse osmosis this afternoon. Anyone in here have any use? Have you used one? Know anything about it? One? Pardon?
You mean to wheel the RO down here?
They can come out and look at it if you want to. I got pictures. If you listened to me this morning, that's the same picture of a number of different machines. This here is what's called the post. Here's another one. The post is where the membrane is that takes the high pressure and separates the sap from the sugar. Just different machines that doing the same thing. All of these are bigger than the one I brought to demo, not demo, but to show at the booth. And they get much larger. First thing and most important, how you treat your sap. RO machines won't improve it. You've got to store it properly. As I might have mentioned earlier, have more than one tank with your raw sap. So you can drain one out, clean it, and then start putting fresh sap into that and using the second tank. You do need more tanks than just for the raw sap. You need a tank like you've always fed your pan or evaporator, and you need a tank for the clear water. You need to save water for cleaning. And that RO water is the best cleaning material you can have, better than well water. Locate your sap in the coolest place because you want the best quality possible, and also filter that sap. All ROs that I have seen, at least commercially made ones, have a pre-filter on them. Usually it's a 5-micron filter, but it only makes sense to filter even before that with a coarser filter. Then your 5-micron will last longer. Two terms that are important: concentrate and permeate. Concentrate is the sap with the more sugar in than standard sap, and the permeate is water. That's all it means. So you've got your raw sap here, and going through the machine. I'm sorry, even I'm having trouble reading that. It's fuzzier than I thought it was going to be. Some of it you can recirculate back into your first sap if you want to make it even more concentrate than running through the machine once. That isn't always a good idea, but a lot of people do that, so they get actually a richer solution. And then the water over here. Okay, reverse osmosis is the process of using pressure and a semi-permeable membrane to separate the various components of a solution. It's used in lots of industries, whether it's juice or beer or most anything we can think of. It started out in the separating salt water to make drinking water. That's where the technology was used originally. Okay, there is a picture of a membrane. You see there's just many layers of material, and you're feeding the sap on one end. The water is forced through the layers, and the concentrated sap does not go through. Reverse osmosis is a part of a group of technologies known as cross-flow filtration. This means there's fluid flow across the surface of the membrane, and only some of the fluid, in this case water, actually passes through. In other words, it isn't a straight in and out process. There's some always coming back and flushing over that membrane, and that's what separates a cheap machine from an expensive machine, or I should say a homemade machine to a cheap machine to an expensive machine. It's that cross-flow technology, so you're actually doing a lot of cleaning as you're using it. Simple diagram of what it is, reverse osmosis. You've got your liquid over here with pressure, you've got a membrane, and you've got water on the other side. So our equipment's known as what's called feed and bleed configuration. Some of the sap is passed across the surface of the membrane and recirculated back. Just repeating what I already said. So the membranes are housed in this really sturdy vessel. They used to be fiberglass. Today, most of them are stainless. And that acts as a molecular filter. The larger molecules, which in this case are sugar and minerals, will not go through, and they're retained on the concentrate side, whereas the water goes through. So really the operator has two valves to work with. These allow you to regulate the pressure and the concentrate, so you get various concentrate coming out, various amounts by how you regulate it. You also have two gauges. One is telling you the volume of sap, and one is telling you the volume of the concentrate. And these are pressure and temperature, and here's your two valves that you're playing with. It's not rocket science. I mean, if you've never played with one, the first time it sounds really scary and you're afraid you're going to screw it up. There should be safeties built in so you can't. Most machines work on varying amounts of pressure. Pretty much standard in the industry is 500 psi. The little machine I brought is way under that, 150 or 200. That's a small machine. The bigger machines run around 500 psi. But there's safeties built into them, so if you are set that wrong and you run the pressure too high, it'll just shut off. And again, if the pressure gets too low, it'll also shut off. Cleaning is probably the most important thing you should learn about an RO before you learn how to even turn it on, because the membranes are the valuable part. And if you want to maintain that membrane for many years, and they can last 10, 15 years if you do good maintenance, you have to clean, and you have to clean religiously. The old books used to tell us that every 4 hours you did a quick, what we call a quick wash. Most people today aren't doing that. They're running them pretty much a day at a time and then doing a good cleaning at the end of the day. And there's different ways to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Before we get in, well, this just tells you some of the benefits of an RO. If you have 1% sap, it's going to require either 9 gallons of oil to cook it in a small evaporator or an equal amount of BTUs of wood. 2% sap only takes 3.6. 4% sap requires 2 gallons. So the curve just goes like that. When you get down to 4%, you've really, as you can see, gone from 9 to 2, and then it levels out. The huge producers are today running, many of them at 18%, and there's a whole group that now are running at 35%. But the improvement is very minuscule. The improvement is right here at the very beginning, which you can do with small ROs. When you make your plan, you might eventually want to plan on storing your product. This is actually a picture of the Federation, one of their warehouses in Quebec. The Federation in Quebec controls all the bulk syrup, and they set the price, which in many ways helps us down here and doesn't cost us a penny. It costs the Quebec producers a lot, but that's a picture of their warehouse. I want to talk a little bit about cleaning, and I don't have pictures of that, and I know that's a major question. You save water from your machine. If you have a 600 gallon per hour machine, minimum you need is 600 gallons for that day of cleaning, and if you have 12 or 1800, it's only better for your membrane. Most machines today have a small tank as part of that machine. That's where you put a little bit of water that you can heat. Either you can heat it by running it through the machine and actually heats it up, or you can put a little element in the bottom of the tank, and like a water heater element, and heat it that way. Some days, when you think you've had very clean sap, your pre-filter has stayed clean, because you can look at it and you can tell, then you're not going to need to use any chemicals. You can just use water to clean that day. So run that warm water that you have in that little tank 15-20 minutes through the machine, throw it out on the ground. Then the rest of your cold water, just on low pressure, you run through the machine, and you can turn it on and walk away. The machine's going to shut itself off when pressure runs down or liquid runs out. You can do that and go to sleep. But your cleaning has to be done that night, when you're done concentrating, not the next day. That bacteria will grow overnight and cause you a huge problem. The other part of cleaning is using what in the industry is just called soap, but there's a few different powders or liquids that are used. When you start getting a buildup in the membrane, and you can tell by how the machine is working, if your production is falling, then it's time to do what we call a soap wash. In the old days, we just used citric acid, and that's still recommended. So put that into that warm water tank and run it through the machine. Then look at your pre-filter and see if it's looking really, if you got a lot of the gunk out of the machine, you'll see it in the pre-filter. Then do your cold water rinse after that. If you've done and run a lot of really bad looking sap through, you should do more than one of those chemical washes, and always do a cold rinse in between them, a short one. The warm water is expanding the membrane, expanding the holes in that membrane. The cold water is shrinking it back. So things to worry about is not using too hot of water. Use what is recommended, and always shrink it back. And do your rinse for 15-20, or you wash 15-20 minutes. Don't do it a long, long time. That would be hard on the membrane and shorten its life. And it's bacteria we're usually worrying about and getting the bacteria out. But there also can be a mineral buildup, because that's in this stuff that we're cooking. So that usually takes a different chemical, whether it's some kind of an acid. If you aren't getting it cleaned and your production isn't coming back, then try another chemical that would actually remove the mineral. Same process, 15-20 minutes, then do a short cold rinse, and maybe do another one, 15-20 minutes, and then a longer cold rinse. That's what cleaning is. Most large RO manufacturers for the industry are selling what they're calling soap, and it has a buffer in it. The purpose of the buffer is to not allow the producer to use too much. If you use too much of this stuff, you can hurt your membrane. The problem is the buffer also plugs the membrane. And over time, then you're going to have to do a professional cleaning, send the membrane back to have it professionally cleaned to get the buffer out. You can use a cleaning solution without the buffer, but then you need to be very careful. And regardless, you should ask your salesman, what pH should I work towards when I'm cleaning? Most machines today, they want you to clean somewhere at 9, some at 11, but you need to ask. Then either get a pH meter or use the strips, and as you're washing, check it, see what you got. If the pH isn't where it needs, then you add a little more of this to get the pH where you need to be. But it's a better way to clean, but most manufacturers aren't even recommending it because too many people get too sloppy and they don't do they don't test, and they just throw a bunch of cleaning solution in and do damage. Okay, did I completely confuse you yet? Maybe? No? I don't want to scare you because it's not as scary as it seems like it should be, but there are some basic rules. And with every machine, you need to get a maintenance manual. That little one I brought, the manual is handwritten. And, the first time I sold one of those, I just about had a stroke. But it's got all the information there that you need. It isn't as big as a book. It's a few pages long, and it explains it in simple terms. And follow it, you'll have no problem.
What's the power source? Is it
electric?
There's nothing other than electric.
Never say never. There are a few gas-powered ones out there because there are a few Amish people that's the only way they'll operate. But if you can avoid it at all, please use electric. You'll be much happier. The other thing you need to know is the machine and the membrane is wet, and the machine has liquid in while you're using it, so it can't freeze. That's why you need to put it in its own special little room. One, for the noise, because there's pressure there and motors running and it's noisy. But two, so you can put in a little wall heater, and when you go away, you turn the heater on and you won't destroy the machine.
It doesn't have to be plumbed in there, it just has to be stored in there.
Well, correct, unless you're operating when it's really cold, but generally people don't, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you could get away that way.
Sap's got to be above, not frozen to make it work. So.
Yeah, but sometimes temperatures are dropping and we got a tank of sap and you got to get it run through. Exactly, yeah.
What size motors are on, you say that one that you have out there, what size motors on there?
Well, that's a 75 gallon per hour, and I didn't bend down and look, and it came in late yesterday. Generally, there's 3 pumps on. This one doesn't have that many. Usually it's a 1-horse feed, a 3, a 5, 7.5 for the high pressure, and then a 1-horse for the recirculation. Because of that cross flow, bleed and feed and all that stuff, you need that recirculation pump separate.
So you gotta have some decent power.
Yes.
To run this.
You have to have dedicated power for it, exactly.
Just a small generator ain't gonna do it.
A bigger generator would work better.
Like
Yep.
3,000 watt, 4,000 watt for the one you have out there. What would that be to run?
Probably.
I'm thinking that's a 1-horse motor on there. And, I don't know, what does 1 horse take? Okay.
generator somewhere around there.
Yeah.
It would depend upon what kind of motor's on it though, right? Capacitor, start, but it depends upon what way it starts, induction type or just a capacitor?
Yeah, that's part of the question. You're still gonna need at least, you want at least that much to make sure you have plenty of amperage to turn the motor over. Because it's gonna be working hard running that pump.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure against it.
How many people here have sugar shacks without electricity?
That one.
Do you?
Sugar shack without power.
We run a quarter.
It's really tough to have one of these without power.
So for the storing of these filters, after you clean them,
Mm-hmm.
do you put them in sealed containers or how do we store them? You're not gonna use them all year long.
Right. You use them for a few weeks out of the year. You get it as clean as you possibly can by doing a number of washes and rinses. So therefore, you need to save a lot of water. Before I answer your question, when you start in spring, you need a source of clean water. If you've got your own water supply, make sure there's low minerals. Otherwise, use softened water so you don't have that mineral. Just make sure there's no salt residue in it. But storage. A little machine like this, you just take it and put it in your basement so it doesn't freeze. If you got bigger machines, you just take the membranes themselves. As you saw in that one picture, the post, it's just the membrane and a recirculation pump. You can take that and put it in your basement. It won't freeze. But there are different ways to store. My favorite is, of course, the old way of doing it. Sodium metabisulfite, SMBS, which is a bacteria retardant mixed in your clean water with glycerin. Glycerin keeps the SMBS in solution. A lot of companies aren't even talking about that much anymore because glycerin is hard to get washed out in spring, and you need a good supply of water, and you need to do soap washes and to get it all out. But that's probably the best way to do it. There are some other materials being used, but I don't recommend them. And if you do know you're going to have a problem with water or a decent supply of water, then just use the SMBS and no glycerin.
Going back to, when you start the day, how much sap, say for that size, how much sap should you have ready to go?
I answered that question by how much water you need to clean the machine at the end of the day.
Okay.
75 gallon per hour machine, minimum needs 75 gallons of water. It's taking out 50 to 60% of the water out of the raw sap, so you need roughly 150 gallons of sap to use that machine. If you have less gallonage than that and you want to run it through the machine, then you're going to have to use some of water from some other source.
But wouldn't you be using more rather than less?
You should use more rather than
In
less,
order to
yes.
make all of this worthwhile.
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, how many gallons, say you ran all day, how many gallons, and say that?
The biggest tank you can find. And then the rest you throw on the
So
ground.
then you get to how many trees and,
Yep, yep,
okay.
yes.
5 more minutes.
Pardon?
5 more minutes to talk.
Oh, well, I think I'm pretty much through this part of it anyway, so thank you. No, it locked up because I avoided it.
Did you have more slides?
I don't think so. I think I'm at the end.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was it. So, thank you, but we've got a couple more minutes if any more questions. Paul. He beat you to it.
There's some talk to of course, there's always, you know, lots of, I don't wanna call them misconceptions, but, different thoughts that, an RO will remove some of the taste.
Yeah, that's a standard, in my opinion, misconception. I will tell you that we've been using an RO since, I don't know, sometime in the 80s, many different machines, and we've still taken first place at international conferences with our syrup. So I say no, it doesn't affect flavor. As long as you don't get too extreme with how far you concentrate. One study a few years ago said that once you go above 20 or 22% concentrate, you start to lose flavor. And to me that makes sense, and my experience is kind of telling me that also. But as I said, there's a whole school of new producers out there going to 35%, which takes an entirely different shape evaporator and all sorts of things. But they're getting a lot of syrup real fast, but very little flavor. And until the large buyers start saying, we don't want your syrup, they're going to continue to do that.
As a dealer, do you see trade-in use equipment?
Some, less than I used to.
Less-
It's so easy to sell it yourself online, and people are looking for used equipment.
So rather
The
than
industry
a
is
dealer-
growing.
Yeah, rather than the dealer, you'd get it from a private party. What would you watch out for if you?
With an RO,
Yeah, when you would buy a used one.
I probably wouldn't, because you have no idea what that membrane, what shape it's in.
What's the cost of the membrane to the machine? 20%, 50%?
Most of the machine cost
75%.
is, and the little machine out there, that membrane is only a small percentage. It's a few $100s. So it doesn't break the bank when you have to replace it. The bigger machines with 8-inch membranes, those prices vary, but they're in that $1,000 range, which again is many times cheaper than it was 5 years ago. They've really dropped in price.
So if you are trying to buy a used one, the worst case scenario that you would think of is the membrane being replaced. Can't think of anything else that
Well, pumps wear out.
pumps.
But-
they're not.
Yeah, they're not that hard to deal with. It's the membrane. And I've resold some machines, and I usually send them back to the factory to get a report on how it's operating, so I can put that on the machine
Where
and say,
do they make them?
oh, a number of places. The one there came out of Indiana that I brought, but most of them come out of Quebec.
Oh, Canadian.
Yeah. Most maple stuff is made in Quebec. Quebec produces about 75% of all the syrup in the world. So we're really small potatoes.
Joe, is there a difference between a maple RO machine and a regular RO machine?
The difference is the membrane. Because you want a membrane specific for maple sap. You know, the molecules are a different size than whatever else people are using them for. Okay? I think we're done, Darren.